Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Hoping everybody had a fantastic weekend. It was great to have some seasonal weather at least. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo's virtual meeting featuring John Jones, CEO of HOPE Toledo. But first, I'll ask Craig Roberts for today's reflection and Julia Faulkner Peclavanos to lead us as we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thanks, Alex. Let us pray. May your love and light shine in and through me today in a way that no mask can hide. May my eyes dance with the laughter and joy, replacing my hidden smile. May my actions of care and concern speak louder than my muffled voice ever could. And may the generosity of my heart radiate out through who I am and how I respond to the world around me, so that others may not see my mask, but your image shining out, moving in and through me today. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Craig, and thank you, Julia. Also, let's thank Toledo Metal Spinning, May's weekly meeting sponsor. Thank you, past president Eric Fankhauser. Just a couple of announcements today or updates. A well-deserved congratulations to Rotarian Mark Urrutia for receiving the Golden Pelican Award from the Diocesan Catholic Committee on Scouting in the Catholic Diocese of Toledo. For more than 10 years, Mark has supported the Erie Shores Council of the Boy Scouts of America as a volunteer leader. Check out last week's Spoke for more on Mark's award. Congratulations, Mark. I also want to thank those on the FAC committee, FAC Advisory Committee. We met last Friday morning for our third cycle grants. All members, namely committee chairs and vice chairs, did a fantastic job vetting over $200,000 in grant requests just for the third cycle alone. It's always a tough process with so many deserving 501c3s needing the monies, especially in this era. For the year, I think we've had over $450,000 of requests, and we've only been able to give a little over 200, or maybe just a little under 200,000, but still that is fantastic. There is a very, very large need in these times. So thank you, everybody. Great work at the committee level. And I'll mention one more time, and probably one more time again, our first in-person meeting in over 13 months will be at the Toledo Club on June 7th. As Kathy stated last week, we'll be starting the reservation process. So tomorrow, May 18th, you'll receive your first RSVP with instructions on how to do it. We've been asked by the Toledo Club to have our lunch attendance 1 week in advance. So again, that's why we're doing this. The RSVP is necessary. Seating is currently limited to 66 people due to COVID protocols. Well, I can't wait to stop saying that word. And I promise the process will be very easy. Couple of clicks away, you can reserve your seat. And then if you want to have lunch, you buy your ticket online as well. And now I'll ask Deb Monaghan to introduce today's speaker. Deb?
Thank you, President Alex. It's my pleasure to introduce Reverend John C. Jones to my fellow Rotarians. John is a proven leader with expertise in diversity, inclusion, board government, strategic community building, and leadership development. He is president of HOPE Toledo, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to the premise that strengthening education will increase opportunity for all of Toledo's children and youth, grow prosperity for its residents, and improve the future of our families and our neighborhoods. John leads HOPE Toledo's focus to advocate, support, and ensure equitable access to high-quality education for Toledo's children and youth via two strategies: expanding high-quality early childhood education, preschool, for Toledo 4-year-olds through HOPE Toledo Pre-K, and by expanding the opportunity for Toledo high school graduates to have access to scholarships for college, career technical, or post-secondary trade school through HOPE Toledo Promise. I've had the pleasure to work with John over the past 2 years, and I can sincerely say he's the right person for this job. Prior to joining HOPE Toledo, John served for 16 years in various roles with ProMedica, with his last assignment being the Social Determinants of Health team. John previously served the community as the president and CEO of the Greater Toledo Urban League from 2008 to 2012. He is a certified diversity practitioner for the American Hospital Association's Institute for Diversity and Health Equity. He has an MBA from the University of Toledo and a Bachelor's of Science in Accounting from Central State University. John serves the community in various capacities through organizations, boards, and other volunteer opportunities. However, his greatest calling is being an ordained minister. He serves as an associate minister at the Christian Temple Baptist Church under the leadership and pastorate of his father, Reverend Charles E. Jones. Preaching and ministering for 20 years, John clearly defines who he is through this service, and it is the guiding principle for what he does in his professional life. My fellow Rotarians, please welcome John Jones.
Thanks, Deb Monaghan. I'm real thrilled that you were able to introduce me today. For those that may not know, and I'm sure you all do, Deb Monaghan is a gem in this community and continues to give not only of her time through work, but also of personal time in ensuring that our community is a better place. So thanks, Deb, for that intro. Good morning or good afternoon, President Alex. Thank you for having me here today. And it's a real pleasure and privilege to talk to what I believe is the 10th largest Rotary Club in the world, maybe? Did I get that right? There you go, 10th largest Rotary Club in the world. So I am humbled to be here and be present. So to your leadership and directors, to my friend Kathy Tate, hey there, and to all the Rotarians that are on this Zoom call today, thank you for being here. I'm real thrilled to be able to share about HOPE Toledo. Many of you, I believe, have heard about HOPE in one way, shape, or another. And so today, what I really want to do is to highlight our background, just to give you a little bit of background and sort of make sure that, you know, everybody's on the same playing field as we talk through this, but then talk about our work. And our work is both in our promise and also in our pre-K, which is our promise work is our post-secondary access work. And then in our pre-K, which is what we're working to build. And then really to have a discussion about how we can collectively ensure that our children, which in my opinion is our most precious commodity in this town, how our children can have the very best chance to succeed, not just through the educational efforts through school, but also in life within this community. So I'm hopeful. You guys have given me a lot of time to be able to share, so I'm thrilled by that. So I will, as Mr. Walt has told me, take my time, make sure I educate and inform this morning. So I will take my time as I walk through this, not too long, because I want to give ample time for questions and answers at the very end. So if you all don't mind, I'm going to share my screen because I do have a PowerPoint just to walk our way through. So hopefully everybody can see that. I hope you can, I can. So we're going to get this ball rolling here this morning. There we go. HOPE Toledo has as its mission to support and ensure high quality education from preschool to post-secondary and trade school. So literally from birth to career within our Toledo community for every young person to create generational economic change for the betterment of our families and our community. That mission is very critical and crucial for the success of our community, and that is what is our guide at HOPE Toledo to ensure that we're doing that on an everyday basis. A whole lot of you heard, and I'll just walk to this point very quickly. Many of you heard about the work around our promise work. So a little bit over a year ago, prior to the pandemic, we were able to make a pretty phenomenal announcement to the students, the class of 2020 at Jessup W. Wakeman Scott High School here in Toledo, Ohio. That announcement, which was made through the strong support of the Cadence Family Foundation and P. Cadence, but also in partnership with a whole lot of people, including Toledo Public Schools, including various community partners all across the city, was designed and what ultimately launched what we call the HOPE Toledo Promise. And so I'm going to start there to talk about the promise, and then I'm going to land with pre-K because that is really a lot of the meat that I want to cover for today. So HOPE Toledo Promise, what is a promise program? I'll just flip through this really quickly, but it is a place-based effort designed to make a post-secondary degree or certification more accessible for hardworking students. There are over 350 promise programs across the country. Promise programs do work. There's some conversation about whether or not they do, but as you can see from this quote that I placed over here, regardless of student category, college promise programs have demonstrated approximately a 45% higher completion rate for students than those that are in non-promise institutions. So we know promise programs work. What is the HOPE Toledo Promise today for us right here in Toledo? Well, we started it, as I already mentioned, through the responsibility of the Cadence Family Foundation in partnership with ProMedica and the ProMedica Foundation to really offer an effort to change the educational ethos for those students, particularly in the class of 2020 at Scott High School. That's the pilot. The design was that it would be across the city of Toledo for all of our students to get access. It is there to create that access for post-secondary opportunities and also to provide a two-generational approach. This promise covers tuition, room, board, books, and fees for those students after any applicable financial aid to any in-state publicly funded school or program. So we're talking about 4-year, 2-year trade. It is a offered to those institutions that are publicly funded, as I already mentioned, with the exception of Lourdes University, which we know is private, but is right in our backyard, and they have been phenomenal partners. We also offer this opportunity to students who may choose to go to Eastern Michigan University because there is a reciprocity agreement with the city of Toledo in being able to offer in-state tuition for students that choose there, and then also to Wilberforce University, which is a historically Black college or university actually located in Wilberforce, Ohio. They are a private institution, but they've worked with us as well to adjust their space. We chose Scott High School, and let me be clear. We chose Scott High School for a few different reasons. Some of those you see right here. Literally, Scott is the heartbeat within the Black community. The current enrollment there, at least at the time we launched this, was about 600 students, with the average graduating class size over the past 5 years being about 100. We do know that there is a high clip of students on free and reduced lunch, and we thought that this would be an excellent place to start. So where we executed the promise last year, and mind you, the announcement was made in January of 2020. We ultimately ended up addressing all of the COVID issues. I won't say all of the COVID issues, but many of the COVID issues that caused our students to obviously be out of school. We, just like Rotary did, had to pivot very quickly to get to our students and ensure that we could provide them access. There was a graduating class size of 120. Of that 120, over 80 families took us up on the promise. Let me be clear. The HOPE Toledo Promise is a 2-generational approach. We offered the opportunity for the students that graduated, but then we also extended that opportunity to a parent or legal guardian. Down there in that bottom corner that you just saw pop up are the schools in which we have placed students over the past year, and they are matriculating as we presently speak. Early data. 61 scholars enrolled in fall of 2020. We gave them the opportunity that if they needed to take a break, especially realizing how COVID impacted them, and I've got another slide to talk through that, but we realized that they may not be ready to start right in the fall from graduating in May of 2020. 61 of those scholars enrolled in the fall. 5 parents enrolled in the fall and continued on to spring. We had several more to enroll in the spring semester, and we will have the rest of them beginning this coming fall of 21. The high GPA out of that group was a 3.89. Being very, 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 very transparent with all of you, we had some students that did really well, but we also had some students that did not do well. And this next slide sort of talks through some of the emotional, mental, and other issues that went on for our children and how it did impact some of their ability to navigate through the college environment. I think all of us would attest to the fact that going to a post-secondary experience is not an easy thing. Even if you are from a nuclear family and you have all of these different things that are wrapped around you, all the resources that you need, going off to school and beginning post-secondary is not an easy transition. So we learned that for some of our students, time management was an issue, anxiety was an issue, motivation was an issue. Think about what our children had to deal with. COVID hit them. Many campuses either closed down altogether, meaning that they offered classes, but most of them in a virtual setting, or they said, come on to campus, but we're gonna reduce the capacity of our campus, meaning that students were now in rooms by themselves. We had many students talk about how they were lonely, needed emotional support, which is what this slide shares with you. Many of them, like I said, scored higher in the loneliness quotient. Others reported serious psychological distress. So we had to really pivot to ensure that we wrapped our students with the things that they needed. Fortunately, we had some really good partners. So I can raise partners like University of Toledo, who use their success coaches to a very, very, very high clip to come in, work with these students, wrap around them and ensure that they got what they needed. Owens Community College has a fast track program. And so we were able to connect some of those students with the needs that they had. And I will be very honest with you, not all the students took us up on those things. And some of them we saw where they struggled, especially in that fall semester, and were able to rebound to a degree as they navigated through it. But I raised those things to share with you that yes, HOPE Toledo continues to push forward, even in the midst of a COVID pandemic. We also expanded the promise, and many of you may have heard that announcement just 2 months ago. In the month of March, we were able to extend the promise to the class of 21. At the present moment, we have 52 total applications that have come in from that class. 5 of them are potential parent scholars that will pursue opportunities in the post-secondary space, and our students have been admitted, they've applied to and admitted to a wide array of universities, colleges, post-secondary trade schools and programs, and we are working with them right now with the help of our team at Scott High School. So I must pause real quick and give a huge shout out to Dr. Durant and to the team at Scott High School. Dr. Smith is their principal, Jody Krall is their counselor for the senior class, and the whole team that is there. It has been really a labor of love in the midst, again, of a pandemic, in the midst of virtual and remote learning. We have been able to identify these students and begin the process of getting them access to post-secondary opportunities. And we are pretty confident that they're gonna go on to be successful. Quick story, and I got thousands of them that I could share with you, but I will not do that this morning. But literally, in working with these students in the class of 21, because they have been virtual and been remote, and I know that's a challenge for a whole lot of people. In many ways, our educators have done phenomenal work working with these students to get them the access to the classwork and all those different things. But in talking with our students and interviewing them, getting them ready for wherever they may choose to go, I asked them, hey, did you complete the FAFSA? That's a requirement to get into the program. I asked them, have you applied to a school and got admitted? Many of them have said yes, like I just mentioned. And then I asked them the next question, which last year's class sort of struggled with a little bit. I said, if you got an admission, if you received an admission email or received a confirmation of FAFSA, I need you to forward me that email. Literally, the students were sitting in front of me, pulling up those emails and sending them to me right as we were talking or later on that afternoon. Why? Because they've had to learn how to adjust and work inside of this COVID pandemic and really do a great job in doing so. So again, huge shout out to the faculty and the staff, the teachers that are there at that building working their way through. The shift that I need to make here is to talk about HOPE Toledo pre-K. Just to disarm the room, I realize that there's been a lot of conversation about this. And so what I intend to share today is HOPE Toledo's idea. And it's not an idea, it's really something that we know can come to pass in the city of Toledo. And that is a comprehensive community-based approach to early child care and education. We need this for our kids. Over 80% of our children in Toledo are entering kindergarten not ready to learn. That is an abysmal stat. And that is not a reflection negatively on educators. That is not a reflection negatively on community-based providers, small business owners who are doing it. It's not a reflection on either of our school districts in an intended negative way. If it is any reflection at all, what it is a conversation about how we must in this city come together to build this comprehensive community-based approach to early child care and education. We cannot afford to let another generation go by. And so these next few slides are going to walk through what this is really all about. Most of you are aware that in 2019, going into 2020, there was a little thing called Issue 1 that was on the ballot. Yep, I know we all remember that, right? And so I must say out loud, and some of y'all can go back and tell them if you choose to, which is totally fine. Our mayor, I believe, took a very bold step and move to say, we got to do something about pre-K in Toledo. I think it was a huge step. I think it was a huge move. And yes, the voters did, reject Issue 1. I can say that out loud. They did not vote in favor of it. But if we look at what we know, I've already mentioned 80% of our children enter kindergarten not ready to learn. We also know that nearly 40% of our children in the city of Toledo are living in poverty. We also know that over 90% of our children in Toledo public schools are on free and reduced lunch. Over 50% in Washington local schools are on free and reduced lunch. We have over 4,000 4-year-olds, approximately approximately 4,000 4-year-olds in Toledo. So when we started this effort in 2019, some of you on this Zoom call would remember this and know this because you were in the room with the working group. There was a consultant hired with the effort of saying, hey, how can we create and build this comprehensive community-based approach? That working group held a series of meetings and ultimately reported out in our phase 1 and phase 2 about what we can do to address this. As we know, as I mentioned already, Issue 1 did not pass, right? But in Toledo, we don't say, hey, we're going to quit. We keep moving. And so we kept moving to say, how can we move forward from that and do a few things? One, launch a demonstration project. Let's talk about what does pre-K really look like, a high quality pre-K program like this. What does it look like? So we are in the process of doing that, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. We're going to establish, and we are working towards establishing a Birth to 5 consortium. How do we connect the dots of really great efforts that are already happening, but not really super connected like they could be and or should be? A Birth to 5 consortium would do that, bringing together early Head Start, bringing together community-based providers, entities like the YWCA, who is the Child Care Resource and Referral, bringing together groups like Toledo Early Learning Coalition, social service agencies, health agencies, faith-based leaders. How do we bring together this large coalition of folks? And most importantly, how do we work with our school districts, our teachers, and most importantly, like I said, our teachers to do this work across our community. We know we must secure public investment in order for our efforts to be sustainable as it relates to pre-K. And I'll talk about that as well in just a few minutes. Here's the overall goal. To get to a comprehensive community-based approach, here's the overall goal. How do we ensure kindergarten readiness and subsequent successful school performance of Toledo's children? I believe each of us on this call, those that are on the Zoom call or listening through Facebook Live, or if you're not even on and you hear about this later, I believe most of us will say, yes, we need to make sure our kids are ready to learn and able to be successful in school. The question is, how do we get there? Here's our objectives. And I'm not going to read all of these because we sent this slide deck over to Brother Walt. So he has that, but I will talk through several high points. How do we provide access to the highest quality pre-K for traditionally underserved populations? We think about using an iron triangle approach. That is ECE, or early childhood education vernacular, that speaks to fiscal soundness. How do we maximize the fee collection, optimize the enrollment, make sure that the enrollment is where it needs to be? We know that teachers must be competitively and fairly compensated. We know what we're dealing with right now in our environment, right? So many of our people had to be laid off or be unemployed, and many of them are coming back into the workforce even as we speak. Oftentimes in the early childhood education sector, oftentimes the educators in this space may not be compensated at the level that we believe they should be compensated. I believe Kevin Dalton may be on this call. He is obviously the head of our Toledo Federation of Teachers. Kevin would say out loud, yes, we need to pay teachers what they not only deserve, but what they, earn every single day. And so our job inside of HOPE Toledo is to say, how do we move in the direction of ensuring that teachers and educators, whether they are in the school district or whether they are in a community-based provider, how do we ensure that we are doing what is right by them as it relates to wages? And many of our providers are paying wages that they can afford, and we're working to find ways to help them be able to afford more. Part of what this does will help us get there. How do we ensure that they're being trained and getting the coaching and the planning time that they need? Lower ratios in the classroom, full day, full year, curriculum rich, culturally relevant programming that is necessary for our children. We want to work with 3, 4, and 5-star providers to help them increase quality, attain or maintain where they are. But also, we're not forgetting about our 1- and 2-star providers, because they are in a position where they are providing quality service, but they may need a little bit of help to get over the hump, to get to that 3-star, the 4-star, the 5-star, and continue improving and doing the work that they need to do around sustainability. We know we need a broad coalition. I spoke to that earlier, but how do we meet the needs? And then this is critical. How do we engage families, engage parents that will support the students' attendance? We know if mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, if they recognize the value that is found in sending their child to an early childhood education provider, we know what those results are. And I'll talk about those in just a minute. How do we also, and what we also are doing is developing the right kind of governance and leadership. We've got a great board. Wendy Huntley, who is the executive director, president of Connecting Kids to Meals, is our board chair. And our board is a pretty phenomenal board. And I'm real excited that we have great governance leadership. And we are also working to seat a services board, which is the board that will oversee the pre-K work specifically. We are working to vet through names right now because it needs to be very broad. It needs to be very comprehensive. It needs to ensure that it is representative of our community in all forms and fashions. So those are our high level objectives. And here's the strategy areas. And I won't dig through all of these details because there's probably about 6 or 7 slides after this, but I want to touch very quickly on these key strategy areas of participation, tuition, quality improvement, outreach, coordination, and governance. We want to ensure, and what we are doing right now with our demonstration project, is that we are working through a process of vetting providers who will be HOPE Toledo pre-K providers in our demonstration. we know we need to make sure that they're able to do all the things that we call quality, right? And many of them are already doing it. If you're a 5-star provider in Toledo or in the state of Ohio, your 5-star is on the step up to quality range. If you're a 5-star provider, it means that you have walked through some serious vetting through the state of Ohio. It means that you are employing teachers that have degrees or certifications. It means you have low ratios. It means that you are providing curriculum-rich instruction. It means you're doing all those things. What we're coming along to say is, how can we help you do it even better? How can we help you reach even more students, even more children and families? So we're working through that provider selection process, and we will have approximately 250 children sitting in seats in September of this year. And they will be placed in classrooms around the city of Toledo so we can begin this demonstration project. The ultimate goal is to get to over 1,000 students, because that is where we see the need, is to serve over 1,000 students with a full-blown pre-K program. We know the tuition strategies. For the demonstration, we're going to use a classroom-based approach, which will be last dollar in, which means we need to maximize the dollars that we're getting through publicly funded childcare subsidies, through the state of Ohio, early childhood education credits, and then any other dollars we can find in order to lever this. And then, oh, by the way, we're also looking to put in place a sliding scale for our larger pre-K model, a sliding scale tuition model that will say, because we all know childcare costs a lot of money. So if I'm a parent and I want to access childcare, but say I'm a family of 4 and I'm making even 300 or 400% of the federal poverty guideline, that's not, terrible. But if childcare is costing anywhere between, sometimes depending on where you go, it could be $1,600 a month, $1,000 a month, things of that nature. How do we help those families subsidize, especially post-COVID? We know we're going to need to do that. And so again, this last dollar revenue approach says, how do we ensure that we're doing the very best we can inside of the space? We also have some quality support strategies, and I mentioned several of them before, but I just want to highlight one more time. Culturally competent curriculum is going to be huge. How do we ensure that our teachers are getting the training, the professional development opportunities that they need, time off of the floor to do planning and work? How do we also provide business coaching? So when I think about what the YWCA does, what Toledo Early Learning Coalition does, what several other folks do, they provide some of this already, technical assistance, but there's a lot of providers. So how can we help undergird that? And we're actually working with those two entities to hopefully we can be able to provide a shared service kind of approach to this work, and really work with providers with their back office shop to help them do an even better job from a business perspective, which we then believe can be reinvested into quality, meaning that we can put more towards teacher wages, training, we can put more towards marketing and outreach, we can put more towards parent and family engagement, all those different things when we do this right. We know that parent engagement means an increase in daily attendance. If parents are involved, we know our children are going to be involved. Now, let me be clear. I am not one that blames a parent for involvement or the lack thereof. I understand what poverty does in our community. And so I want to be real clear. Because oftentimes folks will believe, hey, it's the parents, they're not doing their job, so on and so forth. If I'm a parent and I'm trying to put food on the table and I'm making $10 an hour from one job and $12 an hour from another job, that might be enough for me to feed a family of 4, maybe. So I have to work 2 jobs, and so I may not be able to show up to that parent-teacher conference. And so we have to be able to work through these things to ensure that we're empowering our families and empowering our parents to be the very best they can. I already talked about ratios, so I won't dig through that again. You all will have this deck and can look through it. And I've already talked through compensation as we walk through this. One thing that I will say on this slide is that even now, with what COVID has shown us, there are many educators. We're talking about folks with degrees, certifications that are working in community-based providers across our community, that if they were to take an increase in wage, it would kick them off of or push them over what we know as the benefits cliff. And so it is critically important that we find ways to provide not only wages, but how do we work to ensure that these individuals who are giving of their time and working very hard in community have the benefits, access, particularly health benefits, to do what they need to do inside of our community. And we believe that if we help them with cost modeling, we can help them get there. Already talked about the training, so I will push through this, not skipping over anything, but I just want to make sure that I leave time for Q&A. So here's a couple things. Questions, next steps. One, I know the question is, how is this currently being funded? Right now, we are supported by ProMedica. We are supported by the Greater Toledo Community Foundation, to the Stranahan Supporting Organization. We are supported by, we got a wonderful gift right at the beginning of this year, end of last year, from the Image Group. And we are very grateful for them. And we also have contributions that are coming in the door from private foundations, private contributions, and folks who are doing such a really great job inside of this effort. That's how we're currently being funded. But there are opportunities that are sitting right in front of us. Many of you have heard, I'm a guy that believes in just calling things out and pulling the elephant out the room, right? Addressing it right when you walk in. There's been discussions about, hey, there's all this American Rescue Plan funding, right? Uncle Joe has this money out here for us, right? We understand that if there is a possibility for those dollars to go towards helping our community-based providers do this work at a high clip, we would love to be able to assist in that process. Working in partnership, again, with the district, with and that's both school districts, Toledo Public and Washington Local, working in partnership with so many others to ensure that we are operating at a high quality clip. But we also need corporate and philanthropic support that is really necessary. And those opportunities we are currently working through right now. I'm probably talking to more groups of people than I can shake a stick at, and that is on purpose, so that we can ensure that we share this message. And then what is the pathway to sustainable funding? We know public investment is the pathway there. There are, and I can say this without fear of contradiction, across this country, when we have programs that are being instituted and being effected across this country, many of them, if not all of them, but I will say many of them, and arguably most of them, have some type of dedicated public support to do so. Locally, dedicated public support to do so. I realize that is a difficult conversation, but I also realize that we cannot afford to let our children not have access to the very best that we can from an educational perspective. So you can follow us online at www.hope-toledo.org. You can go there, learn more about what we're doing. All the information I shared here, most of that is on our website, and you can go there and find out what we're doing. You can also follow us on social media, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. You can follow us there. I do try to tweet periodically. Y'all follow them, right? And see what we're doing there, right? It's really good stuff. And here's my contact information, which I'm sure the team there will be able to share that. That's my process here. I do want you all to realize that Hope Toledo, and particularly our pre-K effort, it really is the start we all need to succeed. If we're going to do this for our community, now is the time. We cannot afford to wait any longer. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I took a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I wanted to make sure you got all the information. So I'd love to take some questions if you got them.
We got questions for you.
Okay.
Hey, John, you're very inspiring. Your enthusiasm and your competency is outstanding. My question was, Biden has announced the program, which is right in line. Could you comment on maybe the timing, the possibility that finance will come through, and how that would, interface with what you're doing?
Absolutely, Mr. Wasserman. The question you ask is really a great question. I will answer 2 points to this. Number one, we are not sure exactly what President Biden has proposed, particularly through the Families Plan of his new proposed stimulus effort. We're not exactly sure how that's going to roll out. We've got a team of folks that are doing the research and related to it. Here's the other way I would answer that question. I learned a long time ago from my parents and my grandparents that I would rather be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. And so when I think about those dollars that could potentially come our way, what I realize is that if we are prepared for that, and that is by building this comprehensive community-based approach, if we are prepared for that, where we know we're working together and we're doing these different things and we've got partnerships and we're building up our community-based providers and we're working in partnership with our districts and all the other broad coalition, our faith-based leaders, our community and corporate partners, all those different things. If we build that process, when dollars become available, I'm very confident that we will be in a very good position to receive those dollars. I will also say one more time that it is, because we don't know how much money is going to come, it is hard for me to imagine a space in which we do not have if we do not have how we will be able to, what am I trying to say? How we will be able to get around not funding any of this with some locally dedicated dollars. Don't know all of what's there and how we will put that together, but that is something that we got to be able to wrestle with and talk with. So that's a really great question. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So John, this is Tom Brady.
Hey, Dr. Brady. You muted yourself, Doc.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, there are a couple of states, Oklahoma being probably the prime example, Iowa to some extent, Illinois to some extent, that are funding universal pre-K at the state level. Are we looking at how to do that from the state level?
Yes, sir. So we are having conversations right now. I was literally on a phone call with the governor's children's initiative for the state of Ohio, and was talking with them just last week. And there's several folks who are talking through that process. On our advisory council call just last week, that was one of the conversations through this Birth to Five consortium. How are we going to get down that road? How are we going to talk about what dollars are available at the federal level, but also what dollars are available at the state level that could come into our city and be able to help defray some of those costs and do this at a very high clip. So we are having those conversations, and I've said it out loud on a few calls that I've been on. How are we going to fund this? I did think it was very unique and not unique from what I've heard from folks like you, but to hear the president talk about, we got to go do 3 and 4s, and then we also got to go do community college to get up to 19 and 20-year-olds, right? And be able to afford that. So I do think that is a conversation that must continue to happen. And we are working in that space as well with, like I mentioned, other partners that are involved in that space. Keep them coming. Deb, I see your hand.
Am I up, Kevin?
Oh, there you go.
Hi, John.
Hey,
Kurt
Kurt.
Church here.
How you doing?
Wonderful presentation. Stark statistics. I'm glad to see someone has taken action in order to address those. You may or may not know that the Toledo Rotary Club itself has chosen pre-K education as a transformational project and actually has monies earmarked for that initiative. How can you advise how Rotary might be able to help HOPE in their pre-K initiative?
Absolutely. So there are a few things that initially come to mind. So in this phase that we're in now is obviously standing up a demonstration project, right? And so we are consistent or continuing to look for funds that will allow us to be able to not only operate the demonstration project, but do it at the clip we know we need to. So there are some other quality supports that we are confident that we need to wrap around for our families. When you think about the impacts of generational poverty, how we have to address what the families are dealing with, not just the children. So it's one thing to get the children in the room. The other thing is, how do you address the various issues that are around our families? And so one of the areas that I believe is necessary for us is to be able to look at the children that we're targeting are 4-year-olds. And I don't think I said that before. I may have said that, but if I didn't, the children we're targeting are 4-year-olds. What about those children that may be a sibling that's in a gap year of a 5-year-old, right? And they need another year of early learning. How do we ensure that we can help cover them? So that's one area. But then 2, how can we also ensure that the dollars that we have go towards the wraparound supports that are necessary. How do we help those moms, those dads, the grandmas, those that need that extra support to ensure they're able to do what they need to do for their children in the home? So when you think about reading and literacy and walking through that process, and I know you all dig into that space, and when you think about that, how do we ensure that we're providing chapter books or picture books and other things for those families in the home? Because it's one thing to say, hey, read to your kid. It's another thing to say, I got a book from which to read, and have several from which to read. So it's things of that nature that I believe are necessary. The other component that I will say, and I think you may be doing a little bit of this already, but we also have to think about, when we think about wraparound and we think about generational poverty, when we think about those things, we got to think about where are they living? What does their home look like? And I'm not talking about that their home is, you know, in a state of disarray, but if they're living in a home that has lead in it, we got to find a way to ensure that we're addressing that issue. And so as we work through looking at these things, what HOPE's intention is to partner through all of these issues so that not that HOPE Toledo is the one-stop shop, but what HOPE can do is connect some dots that may not have ordinarily been connected, and ensuring that we're pushing forward in that way. I hope I answered your question.
Awesome. All right. So I was notified that my microphone wasn't working for anything prior to this moment, which explains why the train was just completely off the rails there. But thanks for keeping it going. I'm like, I don't know why John is like running this like he's in charge here. I'm trying to drive the bus here. So thank you everybody for your patience there. We're going to go to Mike McIntyre with the next question. So Mike, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'll put you up on camera. Go ahead.
Hey, great, John. Wonderfully passionate presentation. Really liked hearing part of that. You know, some of the data that you provided is data that we had previously. I'm not sure if you're aware, but in addition to the transformational project that Kurt names, we did also do an early language program a couple of years ago with East Toledo Family Center. And so we have a little bit of history as Toledo Rotary and dabbling in pre-K education. And the statistic that you named, which was 80% of students enrolling into TPS are not ready to learn. It'd be nice if you'd unpack that a little bit. What is some data that you might have that kids that do in fact have pre-K, how successful are they when they enter TPS? And I know there's so much more that goes into it, you know, the household environment, et cetera. But can you share a little bit about how important it is to get that early education, that pre-K education?
Absolutely, Mike, and thank you for your question. So there are numerous studies that have been done. Some date back to the 70s that relate to the impact of early child care and education on students. There are also studies that have been done related to Head Start and its efficacy inside of the space. I will be very honest with you. Some of those studies give a little bit of a mixed kind of response where they may not show these sweeping advances that a student who gets early access to education is, you know, that number flips on the inverted, meaning that it's more like 20%, right? As opposed to 80%. And the reason why I raise that is because there's a whole lot of, you know, really smart folk on this call. So you may go out and look for research in order to find this. Here is the way that I will answer your question. What we know are two things. Thing number one is when you expose a child to education, you are now offering them an opportunity to grasp life in a different way. So their ability to move forward and to be able to deal with life issues and things that are presented to them is at a higher clip than if they did not have that education. We do see results that show an increased learning opportunity, particularly in kindergarten. We do see increased results, particularly at the 3rd grade level. And we do see that those students that got access to early childhood education do graduate at a higher rate. We are working right now to try to gather as much detail and information as we possibly can so we can respond to what your question is, as many others have asked. I've got a lot of research that I could share with you all that says, here's what this is, and here's what that answer is, and this answer related to your question. What I also want to be careful of is that if I tell you that it's a 20% increase, I want to make sure that we've got numbers that support that, especially here locally. which is the other component of what we're doing. This is going to be a data-driven, data-evaluated process. So when we end this demonstration project, we will have numbers that we will be able to show to you that says of the students that went through Hope Pre-K with these additional supports and increases on quality, we know that they performed at X level. And we can then compare that to students who did not go through this process with us. I hope I answered your question, Mike.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, John. All right. Deb Monaghan threw a question in the chat as well. So Deb, I'm going to bring you up and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Kevin. Hey, John, could you please spotlight for us what these programs mean as far as an end to some generational poverty and workforce development? I mean, it seems like our community is a poor community and we need to elevate that. So could you just speak to that for a second, please?
Absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that nearly 40% of our kids are living in some state of poverty, right? That is huge for this community. What we know, and this is what we know, is that the generational poverty that exists within families is high in Toledo, and it's probably higher than some areas throughout the state. We're not the highest, but we do have high levels of that. We also know that that impacts our workforce, because when students aren't prepared with a strong start, they don't have access really to a strong future. So what we know is that if we can get them off to a strong start, it means something, and it impacts the workforce issues that we currently are seeing and workforce issues overall. So per the Lumina Foundation, approximately 4 out of 10 Ohioans don't possess the requisite skills necessary to go into the workforce. So through the whole Hope Toledo continuum, pre-K, post-secondary, whether it's trade school, 4-year, birth to career, our effort is to say, let's get them off to a strong start. We trust that our K-12 districts, Toledo Public, Washington Local, are going to keep them on par. And then we know that if we can get them access to post-secondary, they're going to be well-trained, well-developed, well-prepared for post-secondary work opportunities, career opportunities, and that will mean a huge impact for the city of Toledo. Think about the impact post-COVID. And I've heard conversations around this that, hey, folks aren't really trying to work and so on and so forth. Think about the level of skill necessary in order to do this work and what a training program or certificate could do for many of our young people that may not want to go to a 4-year school. That certificate, that training gets them access to a job, which I believe is a huge component that allows them to become tax producers, not tax consumers. And that is what we need in Toledo. I hope I answered your question, Deb.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Deb.
All right, next question is from Dick Epstein. Dick, we're going to unmute you and you can go ahead with your question.
Yes, John, very good presentation. And I'm active in the Scott High School Alumni Association, and we were very excited when Pete Cadence came before us at the field house and told us all about the offer of college education to the Scott students. Pete told a story in his presentation about when he came to Toledo originally. His intention was that all Toledo public schools would be able to offer the same thing that was offered to Scott. And of course, I have employees here at my office that have kids in Rogers and Woodward, and they were pretty impressed with what we were doing at Scott, but they also said, what about my kids? Is there any way that what Pete started can actually be extended to other high schools in TPS and Washington Local?
Dick, yours is the $25,000 question, right? And so here's my answer to that. Hope Toledo was built on the premise that we would attempt and we are designed to serve all the children and young people of Toledo. So while we piloted this effort on the promise at Scott High School, the intention was that we would be able to do this across Toledo. To do that takes dollars. Let me quote you one quick stat. Up just a little bit north of us in Kalamazoo, Michigan, Kalamazoo Promise is the oldest promise in the country. They have shown the way on so many different things. Kalamazoo has some very interesting organizations and foundations that are there over the past 15 years, because they started around 2005, 2006. Over the past 15 years, they have put into the Kalamazoo Promise, donors in that area, over $140 million to fund approximately 10,000 students to go off to post-secondary education. That is a lot of money. I understand that. So my answer to your question is, yes, we want to do this for all the students across Toledo, Toledo Public, Washington Local, so on and so forth. We know that's going to cost. And so those are the conversations that I'm presently having right now. So we're talking to local folks as well as national folks to talk about how do we fund this. I also believe that there is a conversation where we have to figure out how does Toledo work together on this. There's a lot of scholarships out here. How do we ensure that the dollars that are out there and available are used up every year they're available? How do we work with TPS's foundation? How do we work with other entities, including Community Foundation and others, to really build a rich tapestry, a rich net that does not allow these students who want this access to go without having it? Let me be clear, not every kid's gonna go to post-secondary. We know that, right?
We know.
But for those that want to, that need that help, that's the work that we're trying to drive right now as we speak. So it's in process, is my answer.
Well, those of us, A.B. Dixon and the Scott Alumni Association, want to work with you any way we can.
Absolutely. And Miss Dixon is a phenomenal person. That whole group over there, you all are. Both of my parents are Scott High School alums. So once a Bulldog, always a Bulldog. I can't sing the school's alma mater. Trust me, I heard it all my life.
Me too.
Yes, sir.
All right, John, we're going to pause just for a moment and let you sing that alma mater, so you can go ahead and do that. I've got two more questions coming in. Sam Meldon and then Joe Chafelski, and we got a couple of minutes left. So let's go. Yeah, let's go to Sam first. Sam, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Cool, thanks, Kevin. Hey, John, good work, my friend. No surprise there. Rave reviews from your passion for this work. I'm going to keep my question brief. I know in our conversations and in your presentation today, you always hit on the need for a really diversified funding ecosystem here. I'm curious, as you've looked at other instances of pre-K in municipalities, while issue one was an income tax proposal, have there been other successful municipal funding models? Is it a sales tax in communities? Is it property tax? Does that take you countywide? What does that do to the model for HOPE? Is it income or bust in this instance because it's primarily focused on Toledo? I'm just curious if you can kind of shed some light on that.
So the answer is yes, 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 and yes. And I say that from this perspective. In other municipalities, they take various shapes based on what that community has decided to do. So it is not income tax or bust here in Toledo. There are other ways in which we can pursue this, which is why we've got a very rich team that's already starting to have this conversation as to what other communities are doing. Some do have sales tax. Some have chosen to look at it countywide. Some have chosen to be a little bit more narrow and stay with the traditional property tax. Some have said, you know what, there's a couple of different ways that we can do this and use some public investment in lieu of taxes, right? So there's several different methods that we have begun to look at and to research. And several different pathways in order to get there. I do not have a 100% answer today, and I think it would be wrong of me to even try to come up with that without making sure we really had some strong conversations with a lot of folks on this call, but other partners across the city of Toledo. But no, Sam, it is not just income tax that is the only thing, and it could take shape in the various forms that you've mentioned.
All right, and then our final question is going to come from Joe Chafelski. So Joe, we're going to unmute you and you can go ahead.
Hi, John. Really appreciate your commitment to this project. You know, it's so important. Just wondering whether or not any other Ohio cities have started promise programs or universal pre-K and any success, within the state.
Absolutely, that's a phenomenal question. So across the state of Ohio, most of our larger cities do have an operational pre-K program. Dayton does, Cincinnati does, Cleveland does, Columbus has a form of one as we stand now. South Euclid, Akron is working on one. So across the state of Ohio, we see them in operation and performing at a very high clip. Fortunate to be in the room with those leaders because they're really doing a really great job in effectuating it. On the promise side, there are various types of promise programs. So for instance, in Cleveland, Say Yes to Cleveland was funded by the Greater Cleveland Partnership and a whole bunch of other folks, right? Literally, they just graduated. They started in 2019. They just graduated their first student from college through that promise program. They have a few hundred kids inside of that program now as we speak, and are doing a really good job. And it was designed to eliminate the barriers to post-secondary access. And I can name several others. Dayton has one that they're working through the Learn to Earn model. And I can walk through several others because promise programs take on different shapes, citywide, college-wide. It could be a state promise. So that's something else we could look at here in the state of Ohio. So there are some shining spots of excellence that is taking place right now as we speak. I hope that answers your question, Joe.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Everybody, thank you so much for your questions. John, thank you for the incredible presentation. I'm going to bring President Alex back up and let him take it away.
Thank you for joining us today, John, and for a very energetic, interesting, and informative presentation. Absolutely love your passion for this topic. Our thanks to you. We'll be sending you a well-known book in Toledo, Historical Tales of Toledo, authored by Rotary past President Clint Mock. We will also donate to the Polio Plus Fund in your name. And again, thank you for spending time with us today. Now it's time to invite past President Chuck Mann for today's Chuckle. Chuck?
Thank you, President Alex. Just a little plug first. Next week will be another installation of It's a Ball's Greatest Hits. And next week we will feature the Laugh-In Joke Wall, starring Joan Appley, Kathy Carroll, Tom Walton, Deb Monaghan, Dick Anderson, Annie Devine, and the list goes on and on. So don't miss, hang around at the end of next week's meeting, 5 minutes and change. It's not that long, but it's longer than I'm going to take here unless I keep going. Here we go. A Texan was taking a tour of London. As they went by the Tower of London, the cab driver explained that what it was and that the construction of it started in 1346 and was completed in 1412. The Texan replied, "Shoot, little old tower like that? In Houston, we would have had that thing up in 2 weeks." Next, they passed by the House of Parliament, started in 1544 and completed in 1618. "Well, boy, we put up a bigger one like that in Texas, in Dallas, and it only took a year." As they passed by Westminster Abbey, the cabbie driver was silent. "Whoa, what's that over there?" asked the Texan. The driver replied, "I don't know, but it wasn't there yesterday." President Alex.
Oh, thank you, Chuck. Okay, next week, Monday, Sheila Eason of Elevate People Solutions, LLC. Folks, for me, this might be one of my last virtual meetings. Remember, we're live June 7th. Today, there's one committee meeting, the vocational services, after this meeting. Everybody have a great week. We are adjourned.
I would like to thank Rotarians for your incredible efforts over the decades to eradicate this devastating disease and to congratulate you, most importantly, on what you have achieved.
Rotarians have a very powerful global voice, and they've demonstrated that time and time again about polio.
Your work matters, and we and the world need you. Every idea and action that you have taken has led us to where we are and where we will be going.
We are proud of our amazing partnership with Rotary. As we near the finish line, the work is harder than ever, and Rotary's support is more important than ever.
We cannot succeed without you. We must stay the course. Together, we can make sure the children of the future only learn about polio in history books.
It's only because of this big global movement, which had Rotary at the very center, that today we're just at the cusp of eradicating polio.
Rotarians, we need you, we really do, to continue to do what you historically have done so well, but to actually tick it up a bit.
Rotarians, you are almost there. This is an exciting, close to success moment for all of us in the world.
If you look at what's made a difference in terms of the progress, often political commitment has been a factor. And Rotary has been key in terms of motivating community leadership, political leadership, to get this job done.